All right, Dennis, Dennis, did you get the invite to co-host?
Okay, I got it finally.
All right, Dennis is there. Okay. Mopping, I invited you to co-host as well. I just want to see if you get the invite. You can drop down to speaker if you want. Let me send the space around. Dennis, are you doing live video this time too?
Yeah, I just started on Rumble, YouTube, and Odyssey.
Okay. Should I post? Oh, okay, I can do that. Should I post? Space is live. So tonight is a popular night to do spaces. Are we have a request?
I just approved mopping.
You did? Okay, good. All right, good. I think people will join in a few minutes, or they'll start to join just for the recording's sake. Judoa, the Jews' Uncensored Debate on Anti-Semitism, a Judiciocracy publication. I am alleged to be coach. And tonight we're going to talk about the flat bro party controversy, although most of it isn't about the party itself. Had to do with some protests that occurred at University of North Carolina's campus. Protests, I believe, were staged by pro-Palestinian groups, among other groups, and it led to a ruckus, and out of that ruckus came an issue over a flag, but which flag ends up being a matter of debate. So I have a total of 4 minutes and 36 seconds of audio I'm going to play. But first, the first one is 3 minutes and 20 seconds. It's from a YouTube video that I posted as a comment from News Nation, where they interview the flag frat bros. And they described what happened at the event. So some people who join will know what's going on, and others won't have any background. So I'll see if I can figure out, or Dennis can maybe figure out how to post it to the channel up above while I'm getting it played. All right, so here goes. Here's the first video. This is from News Nation about 4 months ago, after the event happened, and it's an interview. If you can't hear, let me know.
Brendan Rosenblum, Jr. at the University of North Carolina is with us. We've seen the video. You and your friends.
That's too low, Coach. It's got to go.
Too low. Okay, hold on. All right, let's see how I do that. And that's as high as that goes. Let's take these off. All right, let's try this again a little louder.
Brendan Rosenblum.
Can you hear that?
At the University of North Carolina is with us. We've seen the video of you and your friends who protected the flag against the crowd, and I know you were pelted with some water bottles and everything. Just tell me how this all happened, because the Palestinian flag was put up, then the chancellor came out and wanted to put back up Old Glory, and then what'd you guys do?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Leland. So once the chancellor put up the flag, he left, and there was an attempt to take the flag back down. And me and my friends did not allow that to happen. This video right here that you're showing right now is someone telling me that I deserve to be beaten up. And that's what we dealt with the entire time. These people wanted to tear down the flag, and we were there to protect it. And it was important that I stood there with the Israeli flag, because Israel and America work side by side. Our values are very similar, and we feel protected in both of these nations, and it's important that we stand together. So,
yeah, is there's some irony here, right? Because it's the fraternities on campus. Admittedly, I was a member of one that did not necessarily have the greatest reputation, that always get a bum rap, and they're the ones always causing problems, and you guys are the ones taking a stand on this when nobody else will.
Yeah, I think it's important that we all stand up for what we believe in. And I think, fraternity members get a bad rap, but in the end, we have a brotherhood and a belief of who we are. And no matter what happens, we're going to stand by that. And obviously, all of us felt that America and the American flag, and for me, the Israeli flag, represented what we believe in. And we weren't going to let anyone stop us from keeping those two things up and representing for what we believe in.
It's interesting, the difference between the ethos that you guys have and then some of the Ivies. What's been happening? Employers, I know, are paying attention about sort of values that are being shown and celebrated on these campuses. You guys are going to have one heck of a party down there. I don't know if you've seen this. Have you seen the GoFundMe page that's being put up to throw you guys the greatest kegger of all time? That's now over I think it's $100,000. We have it to put up. Have you seen this?
Yeah, it's insane, and I'm not going to speak on what we're going to do with the money. All I can say is that us as a fraternity and everyone who was there appreciates the support and appreciates the support of our values and what we believe in, because we were there for you. I was there for all of the Jewish students here and the people that support Israel that feel they don't have a voice. So to see that so many people are willing to give money and support us is amazing.
Well, Brendan, I started the show by saying, how's this going to end? It's going to end with people like you standing up for what's right. And the world needs to know that there are college kids like you. It gives us all hope. Thank you.
All right. So that's the lead in. It's an interview about what happened. There's obviously discussion of the American flag and then also the Israeli flag. As the story goes on, which I won't play the next clip yet. As the story goes on, there were later interviews about what happened, and people come on later and again talk about the Israeli flag and the American flag. And eventually, last week, I think it was on Labor Day Monday, there was a party thrown. There was even some controversy about how the money was spent and who used it and what it was for and what the purpose was. But we can get into all that as we go on. First, I don't know if either Dennis or Mopping wanted to chat about that interview, the News Nation interview that discussed what the event was of the flag being protected.
Does my audio work?
Yeah, Mopping, we hear you.
I think that interview highlights kind of an awkward situation on a number of levels, but one of them, and maybe the most obvious, is the kid is talking about two different flags in two different countries, and it just so happens that they're aligned, he says. Well, are they perfectly aligned? Can two countries be perfectly aligned? And are they always going to be perfectly aligned? That's one awkward issue that's raised, and maybe we could live with that to some degree. That's fine. There's been Irish immigrants who still care about Ireland and so forth. Then the other thing is, because of our open immigration or liberal immigration policies, we now have these anomalies where we have warring people from on the other side of the world. Well, Jews have been here for a long time, but now we have their Palestinian adversaries in all these cities. And I know that there's some leftists that are mixed in with the Palestinian kids, but we have these Palestinians and Muslims and the children of Palestinians and Muslims going to these schools, and we're going to have open warfare for conflicts on the other side of the world, all because of immigration. And then another layer of irony is that the liberal Jews have largely supported open immigration and Marxism and leftism and radicalism, and both of those things are leading partly to the conflicts that now young Jewish kids are facing on college campuses. And so I wouldn't call it Schadenfreude, because I don't get joy out of it. I think it's very depressing.
Okay, so mopping raises some issues about immigration as being central here, and because there were two different flags being discussed. Dennis, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it comes down to what this was originally represented as, especially with other conservative commentators. So you have, Jack Posobiec, Charlie Kirk, Laura Ingraham, Jesse Waters, even Bill Ackman, which I had mentioned last week. They wanted to make it seem as if it was some sort of spontaneous uprising against the left. And I'm talking about the frat bros holding up the American flag. And what I had mentioned last week was it was convenient that the Israeli flags were cropped out of a lot of the photos, and they were just showing the American flag being held up by these frat bros, frat kids.
Who's the they in that? Who's the you used the pronoun they? They cropped it out. Who are you talking about?
Well, what I'm talking about is specifically the photos that were shown on Fox News, shown on various networks. The photo, whoever put the photos on these major news network companies' websites cropped out the Israeli photos, and they were used, I think, more with Fox News and some conservative sites than maybe leftist sites. I couldn't tell you, exactly who they were, but I can tell you that when you look at the Laura Ingraham and the Jesse Waters interviews, they specifically say in those interviews that their main concern was Israel. It wasn't about the United States. Their main concern was Israel. The New York, did you read the New York Times article? It got into that as well, where in several interviews that these kids were disappointed that there was this rager money that was being raised for this party, and what it should have been raised for is to go to Israel, not for some rager. So, to me,
we'll get to the party proceeds in a minute. I want to still focus on the media coverage cropping out the Israeli flag, and to whose benefit? Like, walk me through your theory on a purpose for that, and mopping. I'd like your opinion on that too.
You want my opinion on it, or you want?
First Dennis. Yeah, first you, and then mopping.
Well, I think what happened is that let's talk about what the real protests were. The real protests were the pro-Palestinian protests that started in Columbia and swept across the country. That went to University of or NYU, Texas. Ultimately UCLA and everywhere else. I think what was happening was there was this was undermining Biden's support, military support, and giving money to Israel to support their campaign against Gaza. And I think that the networks were going out of their way in order to distract from the Palestine protests and ultimately suppress the message that was going to those who consume this media in order to send more arms to Israel. I think that's what this whole thing was. And ultimately these kids are, when they're interviewed, and we'll go into that later, but they were saying that they were disappointed that this rager and this money was raised for a party instead of going to Israel. But I think ultimately,
I want to focus on the one thing though, the cropping out of the Israeli flag, because here we just listened to an interview, a very straightforward interview where the student talked about being there originally for Israel. There was no hiding of that. The video that was shown was him walking around with an Israeli flag. If you go back and look at the clip, that's all it was. There was very little showing the American flag, actually.
Not the initial story, though, right?
Well, this is 4 months ago at News Nation, so I'm not saying there weren't people who cropped them out. Dennis said that there were. I'm saying the one I showed that wasn't. So Dennis said that there were cropped out, and I want to know who benefits from that. And Mopping, why don't you give it a shot on a
I think I agree. I think the initial coverage did suggest that it was an American patriotic thing. My opinion is that these Fox News and others are desperate to constantly crank out stories that will make MAGA boomers feel good, and you can only do that if it's about America and not about Israel. So they crop out the parts that they don't want people to see. I don't think that this story was big enough where they thought it would influence anything. I don't think it goes deeper than that. Not that that's a good thing necessarily, but that's what I think it was. I could be wrong, but that was my impression.
Okay, so let me just respond to that. So that's sort of that's a little bit of a different view on and that's the media focus on making boomers or their audiences feel good by taking out anything controversial that relates to Israel. So to me, that does not bode well. Like, that's not positive coverage for Jews or Israel to crop that out. I mean, to me, the interview that we heard was far more beneficial to the view of Jews in America than cropping out the Israeli flag. In fact, I think it makes Israel look worse to crop the flag out. Dennis, what do you think of that?
I think what it was it was used to distract. I don't think, when you get into the boomer thing, I think it was used to sort of distract from what was going on in Gaza. And I mean, you had the Gaza war has been going on for 7 months at that point. The Iran strikes were going on. The Rafah invasion was going on. And it's Biden's election year. All eyes are on him for his support of Israel. And he's got to send $1 billion check. So what they're saying is, and this was, I can't remember who said it. I'd have to look and find it. But this whole thing was made to look as if it was a spontaneous uprising against the left, against this general leftist horde. And so it basically, this entire thing was used to distract from the pro-Palestinian protests, to say, hey, look at all of these guys that are protesting against the left.
Can I ask a question? Is there evidence that came out that this was engineered in some way?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that disputes it. It was actually, spontaneous. It was spontaneous.
But spontaneous from a point of they're trying to make it look as if, look at all of these conservative MAGA guys. That's what they were calling it. They were calling it MAGA, Trump supporting, MAGA right-wing kids rising up against the leftist horde. So MAGA was MAGA the beneficiary? No, I think what the beneficiary was those who are supporting the war in Gaza, and they don't like that. I mean, again, this whole thing, that was what I said last week. Look at what our own politicians were doing to try and shut down the Palestinian protests across campuses. You don't think that they were trying to do something else in order to take attention away from it? And I mean, this is, to me, and this is my opinion, is that I think that it may have been spontaneous, but I think it was made to look like it was some sort of just right-wing frat boy thing. But it turned out to be a Jewish fraternity. And it turned out to be a bunch of kids who were supporting Israel.
Who gains from hiding that? Tell me who gains from that.
Those who want the money to go to Israel. They basically want everyone to ignore the Palestinian protesters and have that money end up going to Israel to support the Gaza war.
Well, okay, so I'm gonna take pretty big issue with that conclusion that that's who gained by it, just from the interview that we just heard. So here we have, let's say the basic issue is this. There is a Palestinian protest of a sizable amount of people, probably a smaller counter protest of some fraternity students from a predominantly Jewish fraternity and some other people, but smaller. That's the stage. on University of North Carolina's campus. The president goes in and raises the flag, the American flag. Now, some people who do not like the American flag, and regardless of their identity, took it down. That American flag was defended. That's generally if you're pro-American, that's generally a good thing. People were willing to stand up to a mob to protect the American flag. When you hide the Israeli flag, that's the only story you see. If you include, like the interview we just heard, that these are pro-Israel people who think Israel and America share their values, and they're willing to stand up to a mob to protect the American flag, to me, that accrues benefit to the Israeli position. It's not negative. Hiding the Israeli flag in that situation does not appear to be in any way good for the proposal for Israel or to draw negative attention to the Palestinian movement. Quite the opposite.
Maybe because for some people, if they see people holding or carrying around a foreign flag, that is offensive to them, on American soil especially. So it's not as simple as you're saying, because they didn't just defend the American, they were waving a foreign flag as well as putting up the flag that obviously was supposed to be there. You can't pull down, it's a public university. Of course the American flag should be up the flagpole.
Let me just say this too. Sorry to interrupt, but in the New York Times article, there's a quote that says, "You have this huge party with all these people honoring us for what we did for the flag," said Brandon Rosenblum, 23, a senior and a member of the Alpha Epsilon Pi, "but not as much for honoring us for the Jewish piece that was the original reason we were all there." So
I laid that out.
Mopping is saying is, what they're trying to make it look like by cropping out those flags and making it American looking is it's an American frat thing, and has nothing to do with Israel. They are protesting against the Palestinians. It's their psyop or whatever it is that you want to call it in order to make it look American and not obvious that, hey, what we're trying to do is shut up all these Palestinian protesters, pro-Palestinian protesters, because we want a bunch of money, taxpayer dollars, that we all work our asses off for, to go to Israel to support a war that nobody in America wants to support.
Dennis, do you think my theory is possible, that Fox News just wanted to make a feel-good story and the best way to do it was to just make it about the American flag?
I think it's very possible that they were duped into it, just like everybody else was, into thinking that it was a feel-good story. But I think these guys are smarter than that over at Fox News.
But who was on the ground taking the video, and someone had to edit the video?
Well, somebody. I'm talking about photos of these frat boys holding up the American flag and cropping out the Israeli flags. So
Okay.
I don't know, whatever video that was there. There was plenty of other video of other things that were going on across various campuses, but I just think that this to me, I mean, you could look at that one interview. I think there was a Jesse Waters. It was either Jesse Waters or Laura Ingraham, where these guys specifically just came out and said purely, we are the reason we were there is for Israel. That's it.
No, this interview I played for you literally just said that. The New York Times article you said literally just said that. The people there are trying to make the following point. No one is standing for the American flag in front of these protests, but we are, because we believe Israel and America share values, and we will stand for the American flag. We were there for the Israel part because this was a Palestine-Israel thing. The only people who gain from cutting that out, I think, are people who want feel-good America stuff, but they're certainly not people in favor of the support of Israel's side in a conflict, because it accrues value. Like, listen, I don't know why the non-Jewish fraternities don't stand for the American flag, okay? But my guess is because they weren't there, okay? They weren't there. But they probably would have, right? Sigma Chi, the Sons of the Cross,
fraternity had they been around, but they weren't there and they didn't care. The Jewish fraternity was there because they care, because they were there originally for basically standing up to the Palestinian protests for their own reasons, maybe. But when it came to the flag being torn down in front of them, they would have none of it. They would have none of it. And that accrues value to their position if you're an American. They are standing with America. So people who say, and Dennis, you're a big proponent of this last week, that I argue that AIPAC is Americans who believe Israel and America share values and are very similar in terms of like what their positions are in many things, not everything, but they generally share ideals. And this is nothing if not an expression of that from the students themselves.
You're making I think you're making a political calculation to some extent that I disagree with, which is it can look good to, let's just say, some boomer in Iowa for kids to be waving an Israeli flag next to an American flag while they're trying to protect the American flag, or however you want to phrase it. I don't think it necessarily looks very good. Even if it's a country that we have a friend. Some people don't like it. We have a very friendly relationship with them. We're not adverse to them. But, I mean, if someone were waving a UK flag around, we would think that looks a little weird, even if they're trying to hoist the American flag back up.
This was a feel-good story about who protects the American flag. These frat boys.
You made the point a few seconds ago that, well, where were the other regular frat boy fraternities? Well, they're probably, not there because, for whatever reasons, but the Israeli or the Jewish fraternity was there for a reason. They were there because they were supporting Israel. So I mean, really, there's your answer on why those Israeli kids were there in the first place. Is it was the pro-Palestinian protest was about Israel. They were there to counter-protest the pro-Palestinian protesters. But again, a lot of these conservative commentators, like what Mopping I think is alluding to, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, they're trying to make it sound as if it's just some sort of counter-protest against leftist Marxist, they call it Marxist communists, or a general leftist horde, and not what it was really about. And I think, could it have been just sort of this spontaneous protest to say, hey, we don't like the fact that flag is hitting the ground. That's a bad thing. Or was it really more about the fact that what's going on in Gaza, and that's really what it was about. And they were there to support. Okay, yeah, we're supporting America, but where are we as a country against Gaza and bulldozing Gaza if we don't have America in our back pocket and giving us money?
Well, that's a rather calculated consideration for a bunch of college students. But I will say this, and I'll work through the hypothetical with you. Okay, so I'm just going to walk you through a series of questions, Dennis, so let me know, if they're not comfortable or whatever. But basically, is a mass group of people trying to take down the American flag on a public university campus something that you're against?
Yeah, I would be against it, sure.
Okay. And is a group of people who defend the American flag against that other group of people someone that you would generally support?
Generally.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm telling you general. Does the identity of those people change whether or not you affect that you support the act?
Yes.
It does. So what are good people who protect the American flag, and what are bad people who protect the American flag?
Good people who protect the American flag would do it with the support of the United States, period. Stop. Those who are doing it and then also supporting another country at the same time, and also stating and being quoted in the New York Times as saying the original reason we were there was to support Israel, I got a problem with that.
Okay, so the fact that people support Israel, let's say, I'll say the fact that people support a foreign country, and then when they see the American flag under attack, protect it. That's bad. Because that's the scenario.
It's bad because it's for a reason that I'm against. So
well, no, they were already there. No, they were already there. They were already standing there, counter-protesting. They were 100% there for Israel. They were carrying their Israel flags around. They were under physical threat. And then the American flag came under attack.
I mean, I think what we're doing is we're kind of talking in circles. I think the bottom line is it's really simple. Israel wants money from the U.S. That's like I made that argument before with AIPAC. The United States is Israel's wet nurse. We give them billions of dollars. We obviously know what's going on in Gaza. There are people that are protesting against it. The whole reason these protests are even happening on college campuses is because of what's going on in Gaza. And this Jewish fraternity was going out there because they didn't like the fact that there were pro-Palestinian protesters out there. And this was turned into some sort of BS counter protest against general leftists, which is a lie. And it's to support not the United States as a country. It is to support the United States to give Israel more money. That's what this is about. And to make it out to seem anything else is disingenuous at best.
All right, so now I think I understand your position. The original protesters were there because it was pro-Palestine, not a general leftist one, I think you're saying. And that's Israel's fault to begin with. And the pro-Israel people defending the flag is then disingenuous. But the people who aren't at fault are the people who tore the flag down, and the people who tried to protect the flag are the bad ones. I'm just trying to, the logic here is people who support Israel, Americans who support Israel are, they're wrong whether they protect the flag or not. Didn't matter. That was bad because they were there for Israel.
They were there for Israel, and they were there for a particular reason for Israel. They weren't there for look, it's real simple again. Do I like the fact that somebody tore down the American flag? No, I think that's wrong, but that's a separate issue. The fact that the Jewish fraternity was there, and they say it as clear as day, we were there for Israel. The United States was secondary. This whole thing was turned into, the reason we're even having this discussion is why it was turned into what it was turned into, and why Bill Ackman and everybody else threw this quote unquote rager for these guys was because they tried to make it into something that it wasn't. It wasn't about these kids holding up the American flag for America. It's really that simple. I really don't know how to explain it any differently.
Well, I think you're only questioning that people attacked the American flag, people defended the American flag, but you deny their defense of the American flag based on that they also like another flag, or that they're Jewish, or that.
But you're making it about defending the American flag as the thing that they were doing. That's what you're making this about.
Well, the flag came under attack. We've established that they weren't there for that because the flag wasn't under attack. Then the flag went under attack, and they stepped up and defended it. And so you're saying they weren't there for that, but then they did it anyway. Shouldn't that elevate your admiration for it, not denigrate it? We just have a very different view.
They're holding up the American flag and they're keeping it from holding it to the ground because it represents something that Israel needs. That's what this is, and they've said it again. I don't know how many times I need to say it. They're not honoring us for the Jewish peace.
They didn't say it's because it's what Israel needs. They said, and I played the interview for you, they said it's because we believe they share the same values and that they are aligned.
That's the same way of saying we need the United States to give us money.
Well, it's not the same way.
Can I say something? It doesn't have to be all or nothing, in my opinion. These kids may feel more positively about the United States than the protesters. Maybe they don't like seeing the flag thrown on the ground. maybe if they can stop someone from trashing the flag on their university campus, they would stop them. So they may not be as patriotic as Johnny Tremaine, but they still don't want to see the flag trashed, and they also probably knew they were being photographed and they would look good doing what they were doing. It may have helped them in their primary purpose in being there. They may not have been thinking of U.S. support for Israel when they rescued the flag or whatever. But I also wouldn't elevate rescuing the flag to something more than it is. It's a piece of cloth. It's not like they save the president or something.
No, it's definitely not saving the president. So yeah, I think from Dennis's perspective, anyone who supports Israel in that way and is aligned with the United States, they clearly have a motive of getting more money from the United States as their backdrop. That certainly is not evidenced here. Meaning, Dennis is free to have that view. I mean, it might even be correct. I don't agree with it, but okay. But that is Dennis, I think, comes in with that because here were just some college students who were, in a Palestine versus Israel sort of protest, counter-protest. Flag came under attack. They defended it, and that ends up being bad because they were actually there for Israel. And
but again, you're just talking about these frat bros holding up the flag, and that's it, and that's all this is about. I mean, we were talking about the interview. I mean, you had an interview. There were other interviews. I mean, that News Nation wasn't the only interview that was done. And once again, I think you're ignoring these other kids that are saying, not only in the New York Times, but in Fox News and everything else, our primary reason for being there was for Israel, to stand with Israel. That was our primary focus. And so
I demurred that, and it was in the interview I played. I'll play another one that says it again, the Nick Fuentes one that he points out. Hold on, I'll do it. It's 1 minute and 16 seconds. I'll play it now.
First off, can you just kind of walk me through what exactly happened, what we're seeing in the video, and how it kind of played out?
Yeah, of course. So around 12 o'clock, the protest started after 5 days of encampment. We felt it was important for us to show up to represent our Jewish identity and our beliefs. And it was important that we were there with the Israeli flag right next to the American flag side by side to represent that our identities and our beliefs are within both of these countries and both of what they represent.
Why was it so important for you and others to protect the American flag? As you're watching this back here, it just shows your dedication to the country.
Well, like Brendan said, at first we were there protecting the Israeli flag.
And the bottom line is we were there to represent Israel. Everyone has the right to protest. Everyone should stand up for what they believe, and that's what America represents. But when you take down the flag, you're creating an us versus them mentality, and that's not what we stand for. That's not what we should believe in America. We should all respect each other's rights to protest and to believe what we believe in. And I think when you did that, you violated that.
Okay. So again, they say what they were there for, which was this sort of protest, counter-protest thing. And they were originally there for Israel first because it was an Israel-Palestine protest, counter-protest. After 5 days of encampment, after the flag was, I guess, re-put up by the president, and the main protest came to take it down. And they said, that's not American. And we're all here, and so they put it back up. Or they kept it from going down, or whatever their defense was. I don't think anyone's hiding that this was these were a bunch of Jewish fraternity brothers who defended the flag. Except, to Mopping's point, certain mainstream media hid that fact. I don't see how that helps. I mean, because standing for the American ideal or standing against the American ideal? I mean, Dennis, you and I may be on different sides of that issue, but I don't think so. I think we both think people should stand for the American ideal, and hiding the fact that they were Zionists or Jewish I mean, that doesn't help. I mean, that doesn't help the people doing it. You want to drape yourself in the flag.
Drape yourself. What do you mean? In which flag?
You want to drape yourself in the American flag, and the Israelis, the pro-Israeli, not the Israelis, the pro-Israel team are the one who did it. They're trying to let people know American and Israeli values are aligned in this fight, not the other way around, right? The other side wants
How are we aligned? How is the United States aligned with Israel in what's going on in Gaza? How are we aligned?
Well, that's a good question. But I would say the idea that a nation can be, invaded at that level, with that level of barbarism under the excuse of decolonization, which is the sort of the main leftist movement that affiliates with Hamas terrorism, is a dangerous idea that threatens the boundaries of every nation, particularly the Western nations. So I think ideologically, it's a real threat to allow any people to think that that's okay without consequence. So yeah, secondarily, when a threat like that attacks one of our allies, and whether you like it or not, the Americans are our allies. You sort of don't squeeze your allies, or the rest of your allies are going to start making deals with countries you don't like, because that's what happens. Those are two basic answers. Nonetheless, the people who want to tear down your flag, they definitely are not your allies. Okay, so.
Well, that's because they were allowed to. I'm not talking about the Marxists, but the Palestinians in the U.S. were allowed to enter the country, and they probably should not have been.
Yeah, this was, these protests are not like filled rife with Palestinians allowed in the U.S. That's not the bulk of the people at the encampments on college campuses. I mean, nowhere close.
Maybe. It may be different from place to place as well.
Yeah, the college campus issue is definitely a leftist issue. Tearing down the American flag on college campus is definitely a leftist issue. Right now it is anyway.
But I think when you make the argument that we have to defend against ideas on the other side of the world because they might present a danger, it sounds a little bit like 20th century Bushism and Cheneyism.
Well, the context Dennis asked was do we have to fight? We don't have to fight. In fact, I've never argued, nor have I advocated for Americans fighting for it. But we have, but supporting.
Just continue to give billions upon billions of dollars, taxpayer dollars, to Israel.
Well, I think America's probably getting a sweet deal from Israel on technology, but that's the sort of price you end up not knowing about unless you pay it.
So we give billions of dollars in support and arms and everything else because Israel gives us technology that we can't come up with on our own.
I would say they and I've had this argument with Mopping before. I would say that our military partnership with foreign countries have varying degrees of collaboration success, but the SDI success that Reagan started in 1986 by tapping Israeli technology, which has turned into live testing of the most advanced missile defense system in the world, is technology that will be incredibly valuable to America, but more valuable with access to it a priori than ex post access.
I want to add something. It's not that I'm not against a policy that favors Israel. I just don't like that argument, and I'm also not sure I favor giving cash to Israel, given our financial situation. Even though we've got the reserve currency, but I think there needs to be a better argument, and I would talk about things like the Muslim conquest, which is there's now Muslim conquest of Europe. I would talk about civilizational things, not about ideas, about, well, it's offensive Israel is now being targeted because they're colonialists, and that idea is dangerous to us. I think those sorts of things are not compelling and led to a lot of bloodshed in the 20th century and this century.
Well, I mean, it isn't the only ideology. The left's attachment to the ideology of decolonization, coupled with a partnership with what I call political Islam or Islamism, some people call it, of those can very easily jointly align to undermine the Western ideal in Europe, and which is already happening, or at least trying. It's an effort. And I've seen it most commonly in England. I mean, obviously, Israel's going to be at the center of that fight globally because Israel is so internally has such a big and liberal internal aspect to it. So I think a lot of that will play out in Israel.
You mean they have a large liberal population?
They do, and like radically liberal.
Well, they're in big trouble if that's the case.
Is that a good thing?
No, it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. I'm just saying that.
So how is that a good thing then to have those who are like these Jewish frat boys and other people that are Jewish that have this dual loyalty to be in the United States when we already have the problems that we do here, and having radical leftists coming to the United States? How is that a good thing for us?
Well, I mean, I'm going to separate out dual loyalty issue separate because it's a slightly different conversation. But just because there are radical liberals in Israel, Israel is forced to be somewhat of a conservative country when faced with an existential threat, meaning the radical liberals take over until an attack like this happens, and then either they cease to exist as radical liberals, or they completely lose power, which is the current state now. Like they're not a part of the conversation, and most people have switched over. It's a country where
I don't understand. I don't follow what you just said. So,
and I thought that there were massive demonstrations.
So they get their asses kicked, and all of a sudden they become right wing. I mean, they should all be right wing now. They should be radically left.
So what happens is, everyone has this sort of not everyone, there's a large secular group basically that wants to be radically left and doesn't want there to be an existential threat on its borders. And they sort of believe that acting and feeling and thinking that way will make that true. And then the issue like happened on October 7th reminds everyone that it's not what you think the other people are, it's what they actually do that matters. And so those people either change their mind or they shut up, but they aren't allowed near power. So that's so Israel became more conservative immediately on October 7th. But there's still a very large population of liberals. It doesn't change it. It's a liberal democracy. Every liberal democracy has this.
Isn't it more fraught than what you're saying? Aren't there massive demonstrations against Netanyahu, and he's still under threat of prosecution after he leaves office? Right.
He is under threat of prosecution after he leaves office.
And aren't there massive demonstrations?
There are like a good number of demonstrations that are follow on from last summer's demonstrations on the judicial reform. But judicial reform, those demonstrations during judicial reform were, they could be somewhat persuasive. Why would we have this fight if it's this disruptive? Once October 7th happened, it's okay, you guys can do this all you want, but we're losing soldiers, people are dying. So they're still large, but they're not as serious. And,
Isn't it Netanyahu's best interest to keep the war going in order to avoid prosecution?
I mean, his best way of avoiding prosecution is, winning the war at some point. He's nowhere close to winning the war. So, I mean, the war is not going to end. Doing a peace deal would be a disaster for him, not only because he would lose office, because he wouldn't win. Then he would get prosecuted, he would not only get prosecuted. I mean, not only would he be subject to prosecution, he'd probably get thrown away, thrown to jail. he has to actually win. I mean, he can't quit now. And also, they don't really have anyone else who will go conduct the war. So, like, they wouldn't even know who to replace him with. It's the right wing is far more aggressive there. I mean, if you think talks of genocide are significant now, when until a more right wing government takes over?
Well, I don't. Talking about winning a war like this is it's a little bit like our wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. There's really we can take territory. There's no winning unless you kill everybody. You kill every male, or you force them to migrate into Egypt or Jordan. But otherwise, you don't win. There is no winning. I guess you could just stay there and continue targeting people indefinitely, but they're not going to. I don't see how they find enough of the Hamas people, the young males that are in charge of everything, who are running everything. I shouldn't say young males, but whoever's running everything, and a lot of the leaders probably are in Iran or other places. So I don't understand. Winning just seems a little simplistic, because we learned that in Iraq and Afghanistan. We can hang around forever and kill lots more people, but once we leave, the same people come back into power.
Yeah, I think America absolutely doesn't know how to win a foreign war a million miles away. I don't think Israel has a choice. I don't think they want to do what it takes to win. I don't think the world wants them to do what it takes to win. But I think there's a way. There's a way. I mean, people have been subjected to what either your solutions or the Germans and the Japanese. They've all been subjected to a total war and lost. I think a World War I type of solution would be a disaster, but it was a disaster after World War I. So, I mean, the world knows how to win wars. It just doesn't really want to anymore. And the U.S. certainly doesn't really want to. I mean, they have no ability to do it. I mean, who does the U.S. want to go drop a nuclear bomb on? Or it has the power to beat anyone it wants, anytime it wants.
It's a guerrilla fighting force that is hiding among civilians, right?
Yeah, civilians are the ones. Civilians.
All right, so how do you win? How do you win the war if they're just going to keep hiding? Assuming that's what's going on.
Well, eventually, civilians don't want people hiding.
Okay. All right. Well, you might be making a judgment on the civilian population that I have not made, which is they could turn on Hamas and form a government that is not set on attacking Israel.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any other way. I mean, there is no other way. And by the way, there's no other way for ultimately stemming political Islam.
Wait, saying there's no other way doesn't say that this is something that might likely happen.
No, I agree with you. It might not happen. I'm not saying it's a certainty. I'm just saying there's no other way, because if you cannot stem if Israel can't stem political Islam next to it, I mean, it's not like it's going to stop spreading. America might have a decent enough job, do a decent enough job if it's able to close its borders, which I don't think it will, but if it could.
Okay, and I don't know how Dennis feels about the term political Islam, but to me, this is again going back to the idea. This is back to ideas. Like, we can kill ideas, we can kill off ideas, and I'm not a believer in that.
Well, Muslim conquest, I think you called it. But the recognized terms are Islamism and political Islam.
I'm talking about the movement of large numbers of people taking over areas. I'm not even talking about religion. I'm talking about the human condition. I'm talking about Indian tribes raiding other Indian tribes. I'm talking about just civilizations clashing with other civilizations. That's all I'm talking about. I don't share your belief that we could mix everyone together and everyone is wonderful as long as we are all liberal and love each other. That's not what is going on, and I don't think it necessarily has to do with Muslim or strains of Islam or anything. It has to do with people.
Okay, well, I mean,
When you
I will
bring
say,
up political Islam, are you talking about from a standpoint of creating their own state? Political Islam? Is that what you guys mean?
political Islam is generally the idea that if England or France are like more susceptible. I mean, America doesn't really have this issue. There's not that many Muslims here in general, but when a large group of Muslims might go somewhere and they want their own like home local rule wherever in their little town, but they actually want the whole country to be ruled by Sharia law. That's political Islam. That's Muslim Brotherhood, Qatar. I mean, the Iran that's definitely a view of theirs, though it's a different brand of Islam.
What if they just want where they're living, not the whole country? Is that better?
That is not the same as political Islam.
But what if they start occupying large areas of land? Isn't that a problem? Isn't that still a civilizational crisis?
Yeah, I mean, if they won't follow the laws of the land and establish their own, that's an example of it, because it's like your land, eventually they're going to take everything over. If you can't enforce your own laws.
What if they move to, say, Orange County, California, and live in a city, and suddenly they're the predominant population in an area of 50 square miles. Okay, they don't like outsiders, and they have their own. They've got there are police and there's law and everything, but they live in their own world.
Again, do they respect the laws of the country or they subvert them? Because that's the key issue. If a country cannot enforce its own laws in an area like that, it has lost its sovereignty, and that's it. I mean, that's I don't care if a local group of Armenians or any other faith and group wants to like have their little enclave. Fine. It's just that American laws and rights still matter.
For a lot of people, don't want their hometown to turn into a foreign country. And I would
like I said, if you don't have sovereignty, then it's.
I don't want to live in a Muslim country where I'm not accepted, and my values and my culture don't exist. So why would we want large stretches of the U.S. to turn into that?
Well, I mean, I didn't say I wanted it. You asked me.
Look at England.
Well, I did mention England. That's what I mentioned. That's a bigger problem there.
No, but you said it's okay if they don't want to take over the whole country. They just have their own areas.
But they do want to take it over. They're very clear about that.
Oh, it's a hypothetical. Well, what if they just say, okay, we'll stay in Scotland, or we're going to or the Midlands, or wherever they are. But as we expand, our population is increasing, and we're going to occupy more land. Just stay away from us.
Well, again, if a country can't assert its sovereignty over it can't enforce its own laws in its own land, it's lost sovereignty. So I'm against that. But if you're saying that people want to live in their own little enclave of their certain ethnicity, but they follow the laws, anyone's allowed to live there if they want. They don't harass people and break the law. Then what's
Israel?
Land is finite. England is only so big, and the English kind of like it. They want to preserve their country. It's not like they've got hundreds and hundreds of miles of desert. Not that anyone wants to live in the desert, but they like their country. Would Israel say, okay, well, the Muslims want to live in the Golan Heights, or they want to live here or there, so we're just going to let millions of Muslims move in as long as they're peaceable? No, they'd say we only have so much space here.
I mean, Israel's immigration policy versus its domestic policy are two different issues. But its domestic policy is Arabs and Muslims are citizens. They serve in the government. They live. They have their lawyers, their Supreme Court justices. They jail prime ministers, their doctors. Yeah, they live. They have their religion, everything. I mean, Jordan controls the Temple Mount, even for religious stuff. So, yeah, I mean, Israel's, I think, pretty open about stuff like that. I think Dennis's question and mopping as well. I want to wrap up as we only got a few minutes left. The last thing I want to talk about is the kerfuffle about the party funds and where they went. the frat bros, I guess, when all the money was coming in, sort of were pleased. But in the end, I think they said, we think the money should go to, and they said multiple things, including, I presume, to support Israel, but also to support humanitarian efforts in Gaza. So I think they were saying, we don't need all this money for a party. It's not for us. There's other people. This issue is about suffering and stuff. It was actually, if you read their statements on it, it was actually quite thoughtful. They also, I don't think, wanted to be used in American politics, because a lot of them probably are liberal and probably aren't MAGA conservatives. So I don't think they appreciated being used for that purpose. But I don't find anything
kind of funny.
I don't find anything objectionable about any of that.
I think it was a legal issue that when the money is raised for something on GoFundMe, it has to be used for that purpose. It can't be changed.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So I thought that, but I mean, I don't think they wanted to look like they were getting all this for all these people. They were really arguing a life and death issue for people of another part of the world. I didn't find anything objectionable about the way they handled not wanting the party, other than they didn't want to be used in politics, and people got offended because they wanted it to be MAGA.
I didn't read that much about criticism. Maybe it highlights even more the uncomfortable fact that the story wasn't what it was when it started, which was it wasn't really about the U.S. flag and these kids defending the U.S. flag.
Yeah, many of those kids didn't even show up to the party, apparently.
Yeah, right. They were so offended. They were so offended by who gave the money. Not what it was going to be used for, that they didn't show. It's supposed to be 3,000 people, and I guess 1,000 people came.
1,000, yeah.
That's still a lot of people at a college party, in my recollection.
Well, apparently the country music guy, whoever it was, mentioned to the crowd, "Don't fall asleep on me," because I guess it wasn't much of a party.
Yeah, there was some reporting on that.
How do you spend $500,000 on that?
I thought the statement on the Fuentes piece was a misstatement, but I think not giving people credit for protecting the American flag because they also support another country is a little weird. I think that applies to Jews for whatever reason. It doesn't apply maybe to other people, but maybe no other people would protect the American flag or need to. So I just find that weird. And so when I have a conversation about what I think is supposed to be about anti-Semitism, if I see what is either a weird standard or double standard around Jews.
Let me say one last thing.
Yeah, sure.
Is it possible that, let's say that there are guys at a place like Sigma Chi or something, and they would love to march over that flagpole and push people out of the way and put the American flag back up, but they think that they'll get expelled if they do that, or they'll get arrested or something, but the Jewish kids kind of knew they had cover as an ethnic group that has some political pull, so they could do this sort of thing. And maybe that's the reason why no patriotic Southern kids did it.
The Jews were already getting threatened to be beaten up and carrying their own flags around. So they were already in the position of having a little bit of bravery. So I don't know that the idea that they were some sort of special protected group, that wouldn't be, if you watch the video, it wasn't immediately evident that they were in any way being protected.
I don't mean physically protected. I'm just thinking about if you're let's say a white male at a university, you do not mess with this stuff because you can get kicked out of school.
No, I think Sigma Chi wasn't there because they didn't care about Israeli, Palestinian stuff, and they were out drinking like a normal college student. They just had no business being there. But they would have. I believe Sigma Chi would have defended the flag if they had been there. That's what I believe. I don't see why they wouldn't have. Not because they were scared. I mean, standing up for the American flag is generally a good thing. People tearing it down after the president of the university says it needs to be back up and puts it up, that I think people. I don't think any Sigma Chi people would have been scared at that point. Maybe wrong. Maybe they should have been. They just had no interest in being there because it wasn't their fight.
Well, that goes back to Dennis's point, I think.
No. Dennis's point is if they were there for Israel, then it's bad that they protected the flag.
No, the only people who cared enough to be there were the ones who were defending Israel because they kind of had a dog in the fight.
Yeah, but they don't get credit for defending the flag because they also care about Israel. It's sort of their identity and what else they support. Again, the double standard would be if they were there with German flags for whatever reason, and it was Oktoberfest, and someone tore down the American flags and they stood up for it, by Dennis's standard, that wouldn't count.
Because there's not a political.
That'd be even better. But would Germ that'd be okay? Then you could be in favor. They could be good because it was Oktoberfest.
Oktoberfest
is a little less politically charged.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about two totally different universes. You look.
Yeah, Germany lives under our nuclear. Right, Germany lives under our nuclear umbrella. We rebuilt it with all kinds of money after war, and that's a different standard. This is the double standard aspect, right? Like, Germany is an enclave. We have military bases there. We spend a fortune on NATO protecting them, but that's a different issue because they're not in an active war for a fight right now. They're not developing our missile technology. They're not testing it with their lives. Okay, I guess so.
But they're not overrepresented in our government. They're not overrepresented in our banking system. They're not overrepresented in politics. They're not overrepresented in every damn thing you can possibly imagine in the United States, Germany. So it's a completely different subject. That's a whole different debate that we can get into. But
I think we're out of time because I need to go. But I want to say something to Dennis since he raised this. I think that a lot of people who agree with you on these things, I think they overestimate the connection between Western Jews, like in the United States especially, and Israeli Jews. And I think Fuentes overestimates that too. I think there is not a, and maybe I know with the billionaires and stuff, they've got a really strong line of communication back and forth, like real supporters of Israel in the U.S. But for the most part, these are two distinct populations that they're different in a lot of ways, and a lot of American Jews never think about Israel anymore and don't care about Israel.
Clear that he does differentiate between the two. I think he gets. I'm not, and by no means am I, like I've said this before, I'm not a Nick Fuentes fanboy. I listen to what he has to say because he's interesting, but he does make that distinction between the two. So he does say that if you listen to him enough. So I agree with what you're saying. Absolutely, that's the case. It's not everyone, but getting back to this, the flag issue and the German representation in the Israel. There's clearly, it's not even in dispute. There's clearly a difference between our relationship with Germany and our relationship with Israel.
Yeah, I think we get way more out of Israel for the money than we do from Germany, who we've been, babysitting and built up for, decades. But we could disagree about that. I think it's interesting that your argument did change from amount of money to overrepresentation of the ethnic group, and I think that's one to grow on, because I look at that as a completely the shifting argument against Jews is a very common thing.
It's not a shift. Two things can be true.
I know. I'm just saying, once I objected with one, there was another thing, which was interesting, is that's not uncommon. So
Okay.
it's interesting, but I think I do think we should talk at some point about overrepresentation, because I've been on spaces before, and I know Mopping has to go. And we won't talk about it tonight, but maybe Dennis will remind me that we should talk about it again. I've been on spaces where overrepresentation is always viewed as a black mark, and I'm not saying it doesn't engender it.
Actually, you've said yourself, Coach, that it doesn't. Yes. It's not a good look.
No, you're right. You're right. But I think we should talk about it as a separate thing on overrepresentation, where it comes from, what it means, what to do about it, in terms of not people being upset about it or not, because it's a real thing. It comes up all the time.
You guys need to pull in more. You guys need to pull in an audience to see if we can get traction on these issues.
I think one of the issues is I'm looking at Sunday night as like a big spaces night. So like some of the bigger people are online doing spaces. I'm actually just sort of like getting a feel for how it goes. And I appreciate Dennis and you mopping participate. I couldn't even get my kids to come this time.
Well, one popped in for a second.
One of them did pop in.
Overrepresentation, you guys might know this, but that was a big topic in the early 20th century.
Yeah, yes, it is. Yeah, it's a
Germany
good one.
and the US,
it is a good one to explore more. I'll see if I can find something old that's worth talking about, so we can talk about it modern, because I think that's a good way to do it.
Okay. All right. Have a good night, guys.
All right, Dennis. Thanks a lot. Mopping. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Try it again.
All right.
Thanks.
Sounds
Bye.
good.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. Looks like we have some people on. Let me know what you thought about that. It was this is the second week we've done this this chat, and that ALA guy wanted to talk about the UNC frat bros, and I guess defend the fact that they were there to hold up the American flag for the sake of holding up the American flag. And he is not a fan of Nick Fuentes and what his thoughts are on what that whole thing was. And it's much more not complicated in the sense of complicated for reasoning, but complicated in different things happening behind the scenes that give a very simplistic answer of what has happened and what this whole thing really was about. And you could say that the UNC frat boys were part of it or not part of it. No one can prove that either way. Let me try and get this up. And Bethany, no one should be able to come here and take over the land. And that's what's happening. And one thing that I didn't get into with Coach, ALA, whatever, that Israel doesn't allow that. I mean, Israel wouldn't allow just, all kinds of diversity. But it's okay for the United States to have all kinds of diversity, and you can see what's happening to our country because of diversity. And you can see what's going on in the UK because of diversity. There's nothing good that's happening. And so, what he starts making the argument about really is that because those kids are there supporting the United States, that nothing else should be questioned. That you shouldn't discuss really what the reasoning is behind the fact that they were holding up the American flag. And his point is well taken. Well, where were the other fraternities? Well, I think the other guy mopping had said, well, if they were there and they were fighting against these pro-Palestinian protesters, what would happen to them? They probably would get in trouble. They probably would get kicked out of school. When you think about a regular white kid, your run-of-the-mill white fraternity boy, what ends up happening to him if he steps over the line? I mean, whites are the enemy of everyone. So if they were to go out and fight against or counter protest against these pro-Palestinian protesters and something were to happen, then you know who's going to be taking the fall. It's going to be the white kids. It's not going to be the Jewish kids in the fraternity. And all of them are condemning MAGA. Here's some video from X.
Oh, this is just too rich. The Jewish UNC frat brothers of Kappa, Bagel, Chi, or whatever, over whom the Republican Party ogled.
Absolute chads. Absolutely patriotic chads. Just look at this photo. I am making frat boy summer a thing. We are going to make America frat again.
Oh, they're so cool. I want to be just like them with their yarmulkes. John Noonan and Susie Ralston raised them money to throw them the rager of the century. Well, just like Shabbos Kirstenbaum, they played the Republicans like a fiddle. They said, oh, no. Ew, Republicans? We don't vote Republican. We're Jewish. Of course we don't vote Republican. Saying that we're some right-wing MAGA heroes has been a gross misrepresentation and disservice to many of those who were actually there. As the saying goes, with Jews, you lose. We tried to warn you that getting behind a group of Jewish frat brothers who are going to use rabid Zionism disguised as a patriotic brand of pro-Americanism to exploit low IQ Republicans was not going to work out well. I can't be mad at them, though. I can't be mad at them. They won. You lost. Conservatives lost. Americans lost. It's brilliant what they did. By coupling Zionism with the American flag, they solidify the pro-Israel, the pro-Zionism within our circles. And then they leave. And we're stuck within our party with their Zionism, but don't have their support, don't have their votes, and for those who've donated to their rager, you don't have your money. They literally stole from...
So right there is really, really important points. So they just tricked a bunch of people, a bunch of boomers, to give money to that GoFundMe account. They even used GoFundMe. That, I don't think anybody has mentioned, is the biggest insult of them all. That they used, instead of Give, Send, Go, if they were really about America and the United States, they would have used Give, Send, Go. They wouldn't have used GoFundMe. So that's the little additional slap in the face. But what he says is, oh yeah, you get to support Zionism and then we take off. And now the MAGA Republicans are going, hey, we got to support Israel. Yeah, even Donald Trump is now saying, if I don't win, Israel won't exist. And then these frat kids say, we don't vote Republican. So this guy, what he's saying is absolutely right. The MAGA Republicans got played. And that's why I think funny, you know, this guy coach originally called me a MAGA Republican. I'm not a MAGA Republican. I mean, I don't want to have to vote for Trump, but I mean, not going to vote for Kamala Harris, that's for sure. But look what's going on, how they got duped. All the right-wing media, I guess, got duped. I mean, I don't know. I'd like to think that they're smarter than that somehow they played on this. But it turns out that maybe, you know, they may very well have been played as well. But, you know, I'm starting to think more as I listen to this guy that it may very well have been something that was really truly a psyop.
From you like a leprechaun. They took your money. This is what the Republican Party, this is what they deserve. This is what conservatives deserve. They did. By coupling Zionism with the American flag, they solidify the pro-Israel, the pro-Zionism within our circles.
That was the point.
And then they leave. And we're stuck within our party with their Zionism, but don't have their support, don't have their votes, and for those who've donated to their rager, you don't have your money.
Brilliant.
They literally
what he just
stole
said.
from
Absolutely
you
right.
like a leprechaun. They took your money. This is what the Republican Party, this is what they deserve. This is what conservatives deserve for falling for this every single time.
There you go. And this AF post is a pretty good account. Jewish UNC frat bros condemn MAGA admit they were only protesting for Israel. And here's a photo uncropped with all the Israeli flags. So,
Isaac Mala. Isaac, what motivated you to defend the flag?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. And I'll say, when we talk about motivation for the flag, the primary reason I was on that quad, right, before this ever even began to become an American issue, I was on there because I'm Jewish and I'm Orthodox, and a lot of members that were holding up that flag were. And so we were there.
So that...
They're really just kind of holding up our Israeli flags and trying to stop hate, and there's been a lot of anti-Semitism.
So we were there holding up our Israeli flags. That's why they were there. So when they saw this other thing going on, it was a completely secondary deal. But this guy who, you know, we're doing the spaces with wants to make it all about the American flag. Though forget about all the Israeli flags and forget about the reason why they're saying they're there. Don't you think it's awesome that they held up the American flag? No, I really don't. Because that's not why they were there. It was a photo op for them. It was a thing for them to do because America gives money to Israel. These kids, I mean, they don't give a damn about America. If they don't vote if they're liberals and they vote Democrat and they're against, they don't have to be for MAGA, but say, hey, we're conservative, we're going to be voting for the Conservative Party, or they probably don't even vote because they probably don't even live here. And that's what it was all about, is Israel. It wasn't about America. So, and then when somebody Jewish says, oh, well, you know, you're discounting the whole fact that they were holding up an American flag. Yeah, but that's not what this was about. So I'm going to end it for tonight, but I don't know if I'll do another spaces again. I mean, it's just kind of like you know, doing that space and then doing it live on my channel is kind of, you know, just to kind of get out there, but it's sort of like trying to nail Jello to a wall. It's not much of an argument, not much of a debate, because we all know, anyone that's really paying attention and is smart enough really knows what this is all about. And people are starting to wake up to it more and more. And unfortunately, what's happening is the lobbying now is becoming stronger. So, you know, now all of a sudden I have seemingly someone who's, you know, up in my business about what it is that I talk about when it comes to this kind of stuff. So it's kind of interesting. But I think people are starting to wake up more and more about really what's going on. I mean, you can twist up stuff and kind of, you know, claim that it's about the American flag, when in reality we really know what all this stuff is about. So those of you who are still hanging around, thank you. Thanks for watching. Let's give a few on Odyssey. Thank you on Rumble. Everybody's gone home on YouTube, but we'll see you in the next live stream or the next video. Thanks for watching.